So, about 11 years ago, I used to work as a telecoms engineer. A regular day usually meant visiting a few houses to either install or fix phone lines. Nothing seemed different that day until I got my next job assignment, which was for a 20-line installation. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, what country are you watching from? I'd love to see where our viewers are tuning in from. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Now, this wasn't something I normally did, since those types of jobs usually went to other teams. Still, I thought it would be a nice change to stay in one place for longer than just an hour or two, instead of going from house to house. I called the contact number, which was for a contact center, and they told me that either the caretaker or manager of the building knew about the job and would explain what needed to be done. I arrived at the site and saw it was an old building, built in the 1920s, as I found out later. I went in with my tools and tester, like I always did. After talking to the receptionist, I found out that the place used to be a nursing home and had been left empty for years before it was turned into offices for different small businesses. Two managers came to meet me and said they thought what I needed was down in the basement, since there were a lot of cables there, but they didn't really know much more. I asked if the caretaker was around, because caretakers usually know where things are, but they said he wasn't available because he was sick and would be back the next day. I followed the two managers, a man and a woman, to a door with a keypad lock. They opened it and gave me the code. On the other side was a stairwell that led to the basement. As we went down, I noticed the lighting was really bad, almost useless in fact, and I couldn't work properly like that. There were lights, but they were just hanging lights and not strong enough. The woman understood and said they had extra hanging lights, so it was okay. I went back to my van to grab an extension cord and then went back to the basement. As I passed the receptionist, she asked, "Are you going to be in the basement alone?" I said, "Yeah, sometimes you have to," and added that if what I needed wasn't there, I wouldn't be long. She laughed and said, "Rather you than me. No one likes going down there, even just to store stuff." I thought maybe people just didn't like dark and creepy staircases. Nothing strange, really. I was used to that, and I needed to get the job done. After a short look with the male manager, we found a power socket. I set up the lights and finally saw the distribution point I needed, but it was a really old solder block, which couldn't be used for broadband, so I told him it would take longer than usual. And that was even before knowing where the 20 lines had to go. He agreed and showed me that the office fitters had left the client cables in a cupboard behind the receptionist. That was a big relief. With all the info I needed, I got started. I tested all the lines and things were going fine. Over half the lines went to the cabinet, and the rest weren't too bad either. I knew the area and knew I could route them properly, especially with two large 200-pair cables already running through the cabinet. By around 4 o'clock, I realized I didn't have the right connection blocks in my van, so I tagged all the cables, turned off the lights, locked the door, and signed out. I told the receptionist I'd be back the next day and left. On my way home, I called my manager to explain that I might need help for half a day, maybe more, since I didn't even know if any work had been done at the exchange. The next morning at 8 a.m., I got a call from another engineer who said he'd be helping me all day, though he didn't know the details yet. We divided the work. I would push the pairs from the box to the cabinet, and he'd handle the cabinet and the exchange if needed. Then it was just a matter of setting up the block and running one big internal cable from the box to the cupboard behind the receptionist. I got back to the building and used the access code to enter. To my surprise, all the lights were already on. I was 100% sure I had turned them off the day before. I figured maybe one of the managers had come to check something and forgot to turn them off. I went down, did what I needed to do, and left to push the cables from outside, while my colleague was catching them one by one. Everything was moving along well. Once I finished outside, I went back to fit the block. I got the blocks, drilled the holes, and set everything up. As I was making pilot holes, I suddenly heard a voice ask, "What are you doing?" I nearly jumped, but when I turned, I saw a man in gray overalls. I asked if he was the caretaker. He said yes. He seemed surprised that someone was down there, saying no one had been there in years. I kept working with the drill, and as soon as I stopped, he started talking again. He asked who my favorite football team was and if he could watch what I was doing. I said it was fine and tried to be friendly. He told me his name was Gordon and that he'd worked there for over 30 years. I was confused because the receptionist said the place had been empty for years, and the wiring looked like it hadn't been touched in at least 15 to 20 years. Gordon just said that things were always going on in the building. We talked for about an hour while I worked. Then I heard a voice say hello from the top of the stairs. I expected Gordon to answer, but he didn't. I turned around, and he was gone. I thought we'd only been talking for about 10 minutes, but he had vanished. I went upstairs and saw one of the managers, who asked if I was expecting someone. I apologized and said my phone probably had no signal down there. After clearing that up, he came downstairs with me and said he'd start at the receptionist end while I finished up. After a quick bathroom break, I went back to the basement. I was nearly done, just needed to label the phone lines so we could test and finish. As I was doing that, I suddenly heard a voice say, "Sorry." Sorry about that. It was Gordon again, out of nowhere. I laughed and called him sneaky, joking that if no one could find him, they couldn't give him more work. I kept working for another 5 minutes and then told him I was going upstairs to help my colleague and would be done soon. Gordon told me that he liked having someone to talk to. I felt a bit sad, thinking maybe he was lonely or not treated well, so I said, "Of course, mate. It costs nothing to be kind and have a chat." I went up the stairs, leaving Gordon behind, and helped with getting the cable through a wall opening and into the basement. After 10 to 20 minutes, we got it through and went back down, but Gordon was gone again. We finished our work, and my colleague said it was time to grab lunch. He'd go get fish and chips and meet me at the yard. I said I just needed to get some signatures and make sure the lights were off so I could grab my extension cord. I got the signatures from the manager and showed him the cupboard behind the reception where the link was. I told him I'd go down to get the cord and asked if he wanted the lights off or if we should leave them on. He said the lights could stay and he'd get another cord if someone needed to go down there. I went to the basement and started unplugging the lights. Once again, Gordon appeared. He said he didn't know the lights were mine or he wouldn't have touched them. At that moment, I thought, that explains why they were on this morning. But then I remembered the door had been locked. I asked him if he came down the night before, and he said, "Yes, of course. I'm always here. This is where I'm needed." That confused me, and I just wanted to go. I said, "No worries, nice to meet you," and held out my hand for a handshake. He raised his hand and said, "Hope to see you soon." I left, signed out, and didn't think much more about it. A week later, I got a call from the control center. One of the lines wasn't working, and it was an important one, so they asked if I could go back. I agreed, got there, said hi to the receptionist, and checked behind her desk before heading down to the basement. Luckily, I found the issue. It just wasn't connected properly. As I was fixing it, an older man came over and asked if I'd been there the week before. I said yes. He apologized and said he was the caretaker, but had taken more days off than planned. I said, "No problem. I'm sure Gordon will fill you in." As soon as I said Gordon, the man looked at me closely and asked what I just said. I repeated, "Gordon, the caretaker here." He went pale and asked if we could step outside for a minute. Once outside, he asked if I believed in ghosts. He told me that before the place became what it is now, it was a nursing home. The old caretaker was a man named Gordon. He knew that because when they took over the building, he found an old desk with notes, letters, and jobs, all meant for Gordon. There was even a door sign that said caretaker, and behind that door was the basement. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but then he asked if Gordon was wearing overalls. I said yes. He looked at me seriously and said, "Look, mate, I'm not making this up. Gordon died years ago, right here at work." He said he'd seen Gordon too, but no one ever believed him. I never spoke about this again, not until one night while fishing with a mate. Just like the caretaker said, my friend didn't believe me either. But I know what I saw and what I heard. I don't tell anyone else, because it's not worth the jokes. That's why I'm using a throwaway account. But I'll say this. Ghosts and Spirits are Story 02. I live on a 13-acre property in a part of my state where the suburbs slowly turn into open farmland. My parents live in the main house near the road, while my fiancé and I are fixing up one of the old barns in the back half of the property to turn it into our home. Our house and another barn sit in a wide open space that used to be a pasture, but beyond that, there are thick woods on three sides. What I'm trying to say is, we don't get many visitors out here. Since we moved into the house almost a year ago, there have been a few times when I got this strange, deep feeling of fear when I was outside at night. I've spent my whole life living near or in the woods, in places that were even more remote than this, but I've never felt like this before. In other places I've lived, the woods always felt familiar and safe, like they were mine. But not here. Here, I keep getting the feeling that I don't belong, like I've stepped onto someone else's land, someone who doesn't want me there. A few nights ago, I took my dog out for his last bathroom break of the night. It was around 11 p.m., so it was very dark outside. The only light came from the floodlights on the side of the house. I was walking toward the edge of the trees, where my dog likes to go, when I suddenly heard a sound, like someone pretending to make an owl noise. It came from near the other barn, about 30 yards to our right. I was almost sure it was a person faking the sound, so I called out, "Very funny, Dad," thinking maybe my dad was nearby locking up the barn and trying to scare me. But no one replied. Then my dog, who had been sniffing around, suddenly stopped and stood still. He stared in the direction of the barn, and the hair on his back stood up. He started growling in a deep, serious way. Now this dog loves all people and animals. Everyone he meets is a friend to him. I've never seen him act angry toward anyone, not even dogs that were aggressive to him. He absolutely adores my dad, so there's no way he would growl at him. That's when I felt it too. Every hair on my body stood up, and I felt a strong, icy fear rush through me. My dog had stopped right where the light from the floodlights ended and the woods began. Usually the light slowly fades into the trees so you can still see the shapes of branches and bushes. But this time, the light didn't fade. It just stopped. It was like a wall of total blackness. Then just a few feet away, I heard the same fake owl call again. But this time it came from right behind that wall of darkness. My dog jumped and started barking like crazy, standing between me and the sound. He's a small dog, so I quickly picked him up and ran straight back to the house. As we ran, I heard the sound again behind us, but this time it had a weird wobble to it, almost like someone trying to hold back laughter. The next morning, I went out to look at the barn. The doors had been forced partly off their tracks and were swung in the wrong direction, like someone had tried to pull them open the wrong way. But there weren't any footprints in the dirt or the sawdust, and no other signs that someone had been there. I still don't know what was out there that night, but ever since then, my dog and I make sure we stay right under the floodlights when we go out after. Story 3. For as long as I've known my wife, she's talked about growing up in a haunted house. I always thought she was joking, since she brought it up in a light and funny way and never went into much detail. It was an old big house, and I figured she meant the usual weird sounds that old houses make. The house had belonged to her great aunt, who raised my wife for most of her childhood. Her great aunt passed away not long ago, and now the house is owned by her great aunt's daughter, who my wife calls her aunt, even though they're really second cousins or something like that. I'll just call her aunt here to keep it simple. After my wife's great aunt passed, we traveled to stay at the house for 4 nights to attend the funeral and visit with her family since we live in another state. When we got to the house, my wife and her aunt started talking and joked about how they thought her great aunt's spirit might join the other ghosts that already lived in the house. I still didn't think they were being serious. On the first night we were there, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed someone standing in the corner of the room by the door. I assumed it was my wife, so I asked what she was doing, but that woke my wife up. She was actually sleeping right beside me. I told her I thought I saw someone in the room, but maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks. She said, "Oh, the person in the corner near the door? Yeah, don't worry about it." That really surprised me. I felt like there was an intruder in the room, and my wife didn't seem to care. I picked up my phone to call the police, but as soon as the light from my phone lit up the room, I saw that there was no one there. Not even a weird shape that I might have mistaken for a person. The door was closed, so no one could have left without us hearing. My wife told me it was common to see shadowy figures during the night, but not to worry. They didn't bother anyone. Then she went right back to sleep. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep at all and just stayed awake wondering what had happened. The next morning I asked her about it, and she said she was serious about the house being haunted. She said people who stay in the house often see or hear ghosts, but they don't harm anyone or cause any real problems. Even after that, I still wasn't sure what to think. That second night was after the funeral, and both my wife and her aunt said they had dreams where they were visited by my wife's great aunt. That was weird, but I could understand it. Grief can make people dream about someone they've lost, and maybe the figure I saw the first night was just a trick of the dark. But the third night was different. I couldn't sleep because I kept hearing footsteps walking around the house. My wife heard them too, but said again that it was normal and not to worry. She went to sleep like nothing was wrong. I kept getting up and looking around to find the source of the noise. I even walked outside a few times in case someone was walking around out there, but I saw no one. At one point, I was sitting in the lounge when I heard footsteps in the kitchen. I called out, asking if someone was there. My wife's aunt opened her bedroom door and said she heard the footsteps too. She, like my wife, told me it was nothing, and I didn't need to worry. Then we both heard the sound of a drawer opening in the kitchen. We both clearly reacted to it, and I went to check. I found the cutlery drawer wide open. My wife's aunt followed me in, looked at the open drawer, closed it, and with mild annoyance said, "The ghosts are always leaving things open," before heading back to bed. I was left there completely stunned. I couldn't find any way to explain it. We had both heard the same footsteps and the drawer opening at the exact same time, and no one else was there. There wasn't even a way someone could have left the kitchen without passing by us. I tried sleeping on the couch that night, hoping I'd see whoever or whatever was walking around. Several times I heard the footsteps go right through the lounge, but I never saw anyone. Eventually I gave up and went back to bed. Nothing big happened on the fourth and final night, but in the morning we woke up to find several cabinets open. No one remembered opening them, but it was possible someone just forgot or maybe sleepwalked. Still, I kept thinking about the footsteps, the shadow figure from the first night, and the drawer opening. I couldn't stop feeling nervous, especially after everything that happened on the third night. Until then, I never believed in anything paranormal. I always thought ghosts and spirits were silly ideas. But after what I saw and heard in that house, I don't know anymore. I tried talking to my wife's family about it, and they all said they believe the house is haunted. Every person who stayed there has at least one strange experience they can't explain. They all say that the ghosts don't bother people much, though people who lived there a long time, like my wife and her aunt, said they've met people they think were ghosts. And those moments, while odd, were strangely positive. Story 4. My brother was in solitary confinement while in jail. He had gone to the jail nurse for a dental check, and at the time, he was waiting for his court date for some minor marijuana charges. He was only 25. He was the kind of person who didn't really think about the results of his actions, and he really hated being told what to do. When he first went to prison at 18, they told him to clean the bathroom. Instead of doing it normally, he put sponges on his hands and knees and crawled around the bathroom just to annoy the guards. I was still in high school when he was locked up. He once sent me a letter that said, "If I died, would you cry?" I hope so. He also wrote that when teachers asked what he wanted in 10 years, he would say, "I don't see myself in 10 years." His time on parole didn't go well, so he ended up serving the full 5 years. It was for a bunch of minor offenses. After that, he got a job and worked really hard, double shifts at a gas station, and the people there loved how much effort he put in. But then, the guy he lived with got a girlfriend, and she wanted my brother to move out. He ended up staying with someone else. Not the best kind of person. Then there was a drug raid, and my brother got caught up in it because of marijuana. While he was waiting for his next court date, he had a dental appointment in jail. Around that time, he got caught making hooch in his cell, so they put him in the only solitary cell without a camera. In solitary, you're only allowed out for 1 hour a day to clean your cell or shower, with someone watching. If you need something like shampoo, you have to write a request. If you're lucky, you'll get it at some point. He was known for making noises, whistling, tapping, and drumming, while locked in his solitary cell. At 11:20 p.m., he asked a corrections officer for aerosol cleaner. The officer gave it to him. He had made a kind of tool using a rag and a toilet paper holder. He had also written a message on his clothes that said, "You should delete yourself," directed at the officer because he truly hated them. Around 2 a.m., the aerosol can hit the floor. A guy in the cell next to him started shouting for help, but by that time, it was already too late. My brother had passed away. Still, they called my mother and told her he was in critical condition at the hospital, but he wasn't in the hospital room. He was lying on a stretcher in the hallway, covered by a sheet. She was only called in to identify his body. The officer who gave him the cleaner didn't get in trouble. When they sent us his personal things, they even included the rag and the toilet paper holder. They also offered to send us the video footage of them dragging him out of his cell and trying CPR. Later on, a friend's husband started working at that same jail as a corrections officer. He said that every night, the same sounds, whistling, tapping, and drumming, could be heard. Everyone heard them. People would ask, "Who's that blonde guy walking around?" Years after my brother died, his driver's license was found lying on the floor in the corrections officer's storage room. Right after he passed, I started finding pennies in random places. I would also have dreams where I told him he had died, but he didn't believe me. Later, the dreams changed. I'd be happy to see him, and I'd tell him goodbye again. Eventually, in one dream, he told me he was ready to leave. I still miss him. It's been more than 20 years, but I still feel the pain, and every now and then, I still find. Story 5. So I recently started working at a liquor store in my neighborhood. It's just 5 minutes away from where I live. And honestly, I really like the job because it's relaxed. Since I've lived here a while, I already know a lot of the regular customers that come in. This job has also helped me reconnect with some people I hadn't seen in years. One day, an old friend from high school came in. Let's call him Steve. He remembered me right away. We hadn't seen each other in a long time, So we caught up and even made plans to hang out with another mutual friend soon. I remember we laughed about how our mutual friend would always tell stories that sounded fake. For example, he once told us both that he got shot in the leg, but every time he told the story, the details were different. I joked that our friend was like Paul Bunyan with his crazy stories. Steve laughed and said, "Yeah, bro, he's totally Paul Bunyan." I remember Steve bought some beat boxes that day, a popular drink we sell. I remember the exact flavor he picked. I even asked him if they were good and he said, "Yeah, they mess you up." About a week later, I came into work and saw my coworker Diane. She was acting a bit off, and I could tell something was wrong. She asked if I remembered Steve, and I said yes. Then she told me that he had passed away. I asked if it was an overdose, but she said no, and added that she didn't feel it was her place to say what really happened. I thought about it for a while and decided that the next time I saw Diane, I'd tell her that Steve was my high school friend, not just some customer I knew from the store. A few days later, during shift change, I saw her again. I usually work the late shift from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Before I got the chance to talk to her, our manager came in, and Diane went outside to talk to her. I let them talk for a bit, then I went outside to tell the manager that I needed to use the bathroom real quick. That's when I overheard Diane say something like, "Yeah, it's messed up that they're making the wife pay to have the brains cleaned up." The manager replied, "Yeah, she'll probably get a bill for that cleanup." When I heard that, I knew what had happened. I went back into the store and just stood there feeling really sad for Steve. I spaced out for a few minutes, and when I went back outside, Diane and the manager were looking at me like they knew I had heard what they said and were waiting to see if I'd say something. I didn't say anything right away. Later, when I was alone with Diane, I told her that I'd known Steve since high school. After that, she opened up to me. She told me that something similar had happened to her a few years ago with an ex. So this brought back memories. She also told me more about Steve. He had just had a newborn baby 2 days before everything happened, and he had another son who was about 4 years old. Steve had been with his partner for 8 years, and their relationship had been steady. Diane said she had known both Steve and his girlfriend since they were in first grade. They all grew up together. She said that she had been driving with Steve's girlfriend in the back seat one day. The girlfriend was finally able to rest and get some sleep, and while she was sleeping, the 4-year-old asked, "Where's Daddy? Why can't I see him anymore?" They told the little boy that his dad was with God now. It's heartbreaking because the poor kid now thinks that God took his dad away, and he's mad at God for it. That night, things started to feel strange. I was restocking drinks in the back around 1 a.m. when I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. It felt like someone I knew was with me, even though I couldn't see anyone. I had this feeling that maybe Steve was trying to send me a message. I told myself that if I saw anything, I'd try not to be scared and would do my best to understand it. I picked up the same drink he bought last time and put it on the shelf. Then I bent down to grab something else, and suddenly the drink I just placed got smacked off the shelf loudly, like someone was upset and hit it. It made me really uneasy. I ended up calling a few friends to come hang out with me for the rest of the shift. I even took a few shots of whiskey to calm myself down. Later that night after work, I told my mom about what happened. She said maybe he was upset about what he did and was feeling regretful now that it was too late to fix it. My mom is a Buddhist, and she gave me a Buddhist prayer to play at work to bring good energy. I played the prayer at work the next day, and my mom also came with me during part of my shift. While the prayer was playing, a foam cup suddenly got tossed. But this time, it didn't feel scary or angry. Both my mom and I saw it, and it felt more peaceful, almost like Steve was saying he heard the prayer. My mom said it felt like he was trying to talk to us. In my heart, I believe the prayer helped, and that Steve found some peace. The foam cup being gently tossed felt like his way of saying, "Hey man, sorry I scared you before, but I'm okay now." I really miss my friend, and I hope that anyone reading this who's having a hard time in life knows that it's possible to get through it. Please don't give up. Taking your own life isn't the answer. It only brings more pain to the people who love you. Story 6. I gave birth to my baby at 26 weeks almost 2 weeks ago, but something happened during labor that I can't stop thinking about. I'm not sure if this is normal or not, but I wanted to share it here and see if anyone else has gone through something like it. During labor, I wasn't on any heavy medication, just morphine and some gas and air, which shouldn't make anyone see things. I know this because I had the same mix when I gave birth to my daughter 3 years ago, and nothing strange happened that time. Near the end of labor, right before I started pushing and the pain got really intense, a young man came into the room. He had a white shirt, blue jeans, and dark hair. I had turned my head away from the door to talk to my fiancé, but I saw the man walk in and stand beside him. I asked both the midwife and my fiancé if they could ask him to leave because I only wanted us in the room, but they said no one else was there. Still, I clearly saw him. He was right there, and I could even remember his face and clothes. I didn't know who he was, and he just stared at me for about a minute before walking away. Not long after that, I gave birth to my son. He walked in the direction of the room where they usually take the baby for checkups and to clean and wrap them, especially because my baby needed extra care due to being born early. I remember clearly that this man walked toward that room. There's no doubt about that. I'm sharing this now because today I saw a TikTok video where a woman went through something similar during an emergency C-section, and she said she saw her dad who had passed away in 2008. I still don't know who the man I saw was. When I talked about it again with my fiancé, he started to think maybe it could have been his grandfather who passed away when he was young. He had been murdered, but even now we're not completely sure. I keep wondering, am I losing my mind for thinking that it could have been a spirit there to guide my baby to safety? Could it have been a vision of what my son will look like when he grows up? I honestly have no idea, but it's been stuck in my mind ever since. Story 7. I've been awake since 5 a.m., and I just can't stop thinking about what happened. Last night I was sleeping and having a nightmare where I was in an apartment looking into a kitchen. All the drawers, cabinets, and even the pantry door were opening and closing by themselves like something out of a ghost movie. I was terrified in the dream and started praying. My wife, who was in bed next to me, must have noticed I was mumbling or stressed in my sleep because she kicked my foot and woke me up. That's when things got strange. I woke up quickly because of the kick, and I felt relieved that the nightmare was over. I turned to look at my wife lying beside me and said, "Thank you, babe, sorry about that. I was having a nightmare." But she didn't reply, so I figured she was already back asleep or just too tired to answer. Then I turned my head back forward, the same way I'd been sleeping before, and I saw something in the corner of the room near the bedroom door. The room was dark, but I could still see its skin, which looked like a dark matte gray. It was thin, had long, skinny arms and legs, a small body, a narrow neck, and a large round head. The eyes were huge, black, and shaped like almonds. It looked exactly like how people describe a gray alien, but a little see-through. I was shocked. At first, I thought I must be seeing things because I had just woken up. I rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. I tried to stay calm and thought maybe I was just seeing leftover dream images in my brain. I sat up a bit and looked around the room, at the ceiling, the closet, the floor, but I saw nothing else. I looked back at the door, and the figure was still standing there, not moving, just staring at me with those huge black eyes. It looked even more real than before, and was still see-through but very clear in that one spot. Because I live in Texas where the power grid isn't great, I always keep a flashlight next to my bed. After seeing this thing for about a minute and a half, I finally thought to grab the flashlight. I leaned over, picked it up, and pointed it at the corner. As soon as the light hit it, the figure became much harder to see. I could still make out its shape, but it was much fainter. I slowly moved the flashlight around the room, scanning every corner from my bed, because no way was I getting out of bed, and saw nothing else strange at all. Just that one figure in the same spot. When I turned the flashlight off, I could see it clearly again. I rubbed my eyes hard, hoping maybe I was just seeing things, but it didn't disappear. At this point, I really started freaking out. I began praying out loud, and after about 20 seconds of praying, I saw the thing slowly fade away. It didn't move or react. It just began to fade, becoming more and more see-through until it was completely gone, like it disappeared into thin air right in front of me. I haven't been able to go back to sleep since. I spent the rest of the night reading random posts on Reddit to try and take my mind off of it. This really messed with me, and I still don't know what to think. I'm just wondering if anyone else has ever had something like this happen. I feel so weird about it, and I honestly don't know how to explain it. Story 8. I started working at a convenience store back in the 90s. Not long before I started, the owner's son had been working a shift when a man rushed in asking for a knife. He said he'd been in a car accident and his girlfriend was stuck because her seatbelt wouldn't come off. The owner's son turned to grab the bagel knife, but by the time he turned back, the man had already collapsed and died on the floor. His seatbelt had crushed his throat somehow, and even though the adrenaline kept him going for a little while, he ended up suffocating right there at the counter. I had no idea about this when I first started. I only found out later after I began asking about the strange things I was experiencing in the store. I would sometimes feel like someone kicked or poked me in the leg or shoulder, even though no one was behind me. I'd walk through cold spots that moved around the store. I'd catch the reflection of someone in the cooler door, but when I turned around, nobody was there. When I was inside the cooler stocking sodas, I always felt like I was being watched. The strangest thing, though, was the knife, the same bagel knife. While working alone on camera with no one else there, that knife would suddenly disappear the moment I turned my back. Then later I'd find it again, often in a different place. Other staff told me they had things like this happen to them too. The overnight shift was always just one person, and the store was often empty. People who worked those shifts said they heard noises, sometimes whistling, but mostly crying. I eventually learned that the girlfriend who was in the accident that night was actually a teacher at my high school. So while working, I started talking out loud, letting him know she had survived, that she was okay, and that he could let go. After that, things slowly started to calm down. I stopped getting poked, and the knife stayed where I left it. Without a doubt, that was the most intense experience I've ever had. Story 9. The Manic Mother. So yesterday was my 29th birthday, and honestly, it was a terrible day. Once all the kids were finally in bed, my spouse and I sat down to watch TV, but he ended up falling asleep around midnight. At that point, everything from the day hit me all at once, and I broke down sobbing, like full-on ugly crying. From the couch where I was sitting, I could see through the open space into the dining room, where there's a drop-down lip from the ceiling with a little shelf for photos. And I could also see through the kitchen doorway all the way to the back door. The TV was the only light in the house. Last week, when my daughter finished school, I bought her 3 balloons that had been floating around the house. One was to my left, One had gotten wedged in the dining room fan blades, and another was sitting near a chair by the kitchen doorway. As I was crying, I thought I saw a small flash of light in the dining room. At first, I figured maybe it was just the TV reflecting off one of my kids' toys. But when I kept staring, I noticed the balloon string closest to the kitchen was moving. As I kept watching, I saw the balloon slowly start gliding across the floor, heading in my direction. We do have central air, and it was running, but none of the other balloons or their strings were moving at all. This one just kept coming closer and closer. I thought it would stop at the little lip that hangs down between the dining and living room, but instead it paused there, then lowered itself, gently bumping against the shelf before continuing into the living room. By that point, I wasn't even crying anymore. I was just frozen in place, terrified. The balloon kept gliding straight towards me until it stopped right in front of me. Then it shifted slightly to the left, and the string touched my left hand. I sat there in shock, not knowing what to do. Then it shifted back in front of me, and once again moved to the left so the string brushed against my hand a second time. Finally, I just grabbed the string and held on to it. At the same time, I kept trying to shake my husband awake. Eventually, I got his attention, and when he sat up, he asked me why I was holding a balloon. I told him exactly what happened, and all he said was that he wished he had been awake to see how scared I looked. So yeah, I had a horrible birthday, but I think maybe someone, or something, from the other side wanted to make sure I still got a balloon. Story 10. A few years ago, I was woken up on a Sunday morning by a phone call. It was a little girl, maybe around 4 years old. She said, "Good morning, Granddad." I laughed a little because she sounded sweet, and I gently told her she had the wrong number. "Oh," she said, and then hung up. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. "Morning, Granddad," she said once more. I laughed again and told her she had dialed the wrong number again. "Are you coming, Granddad?" "What time are you coming? Hurry up. We're about to get started," she said, sounding super excited. It felt like there was a birthday party or some big celebration going on. I was still smiling and trying to explain that she had the wrong number and I wasn't her granddad. I told her goodbye and hung up the phone. I lay there in bed still laughing when a minute later the phone rang again. "Morning, Granddad," she said for the third time. I explained again that I wasn't her granddad. She replied, "You are my granddad, silly," in a playful tone, like she thought I was joking with her. She really believed I was playing a game. Again, I told her that I wasn't her granddad. Then she suddenly dropped the phone and ran off. I could hear her in the background saying, "Dad, Granddad's playing tricks on me. He won't talk to me." I could tell she was starting to get a bit upset. Then a man picked up the phone. "Dad, is everything okay?" the man asked. I was still finding the situation kind of funny, so I explained that his daughter had just dialed the wrong number a few times, and it was all just a little mistake. Then the man said in a serious tone, "Okay, Dad, are you at home?" "Stay where you are. We're on our way over." Now he thought I was his dad too, so I wasn't laughing anymore. I explained again that I wasn't who he thought I was, just that it was a wrong number. But what he said next really freaked me out. He said my real name and added, "I'm really worried now. We'll be over in 15 minutes. Don't move." At that point, I hung up the phone and just laid in bed wondering what the heck was going on. They never called back, and I just assumed it must have been a prank by a friend. Over the next few days, I asked all my friends if they did it. Every single one of them promised they hadn't. What really got me was that not only did the little girl think I was her granddad, but the man also thought I was his dad, and he knew my real first name. Sure, coincidences happen, but this was just strange. A few days later, still confused, I decided to call the number back just to see who would answer, but the number wasn't in use. I only got a dead tone. Weird, right? I think maybe I got a call from a granddaughter in some other universe or something, and based on how happy she sounded, the version of me from that place was one lucky guy. Story 11. I bought a black Labrador Retriever puppy back in 2009 because I had gotten into duck hunting. I read a bunch of books on how to train dogs and decided to do the training myself. It became part of my daily routine to work with him before and after work. From the very start, I could tell this dog was different. He picked up commands so fast and was easy to train. Now that I've trained several other retrievers, I realized just how special he really was. At first, he was just my hunting partner for about a year until I met someone who was into retriever competitions. After a little convincing, I decided to enter my dog into a few of them, and he did great. He earned titles like Junior Hunter and Started Hunter in both the AKC and HRC when he was only a year old. After a while, though, I lost interest in those competitions, and he just went back to being my hunting buddy. Over the years, he retrieved hundreds of ducks for me and spent a lot of time out in the field with me. He went with me everywhere, slept inside, and played with my young kids back then. He was truly a one-in-a-million kind of dog. In 2016, I let him outside to use the bathroom, and I never saw him again. I live in a pretty rural part of Texas, so at first I thought he'd just come back on his own soon. But he didn't. I looked for him for months. I made posts on Facebook, asked neighbors, and even made flyers offering a $1,000 reward and left them at businesses in town. It took a long time for me to finally accept that he wasn't coming home. I have a Cane Corso now, and just last night, November 1st, 2021, I woke up to him barking, which is rare for him. I went downstairs to check it out and turned on the porch light. There was a black lab lying on the porch. The first thing I noticed was the collar. It was black leather with orange reflective circles, the same kind I had gotten from my old lab. Sure, I know other collars like that exist, but this one had something special. My kids had put a pink strip of duct tape on it near the buckle. As soon as I saw that pink tape, my heart almost stopped. I didn't want my Cane Corso to get out because he's very protective, so I grabbed his collar and put him in the laundry room. I quickly went back to the front door and opened it, but the dog was gone. I grabbed a flashlight and searched all over my yard but couldn't find him. I stayed up most of the night calling for him, but he never came back. I still can't explain what happened, and I feel kind of weird even telling anyone because it sounds so unbelievable. He had been gone for over 5 years. Do you really think it was him? Story 12. This is a story about Hilda, my sweet little old lady hospice patient who lived in a nursing home in Odessa, Texas. It's also a story about Claude, her son, who was also one of my hospice patients. He lived at home in Midland, Texas, with his wife, Joni. Yes, both Mother Hilda and son Claude were dying at the same time, but in two different places about 20 miles apart. Poor Joni, the wife and daughter-in-law, was trying to care for both of them, and she was doing a wonderful job holding everything together. Between the two of them, I honestly thought Claude would pass first. He was confused, still moving a bit, but getting weaker and looking very sick. I figured I'd only be visiting him for another couple of weeks before he passed. His mom, Hilda, on the other hand, seemed to be doing better. I thought she might have a few months left, maybe even longer. She had lived in the nursing home for a while and had Alzheimer's, which had slowly taken over. She was nearly stuck in bed, eating less and losing weight. Yes, she was very confused, but she was always kind and sweet even in her confusion. I usually saw her twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, usually after seeing Claude the same day. Each time I visited her, I had to reintroduce myself, and we'd talk for a bit. Sometimes she'd tell me the same stories over and over again from her younger years, but she always made me smile. Because of her confusion, she'd say things that didn't make sense, like saying she was going to play baseball at the park, even though just getting out of bed was hard for her. But even with all that, she was a very sweet woman, even if she forgot who I was or said odd things now and then. I didn't think she'd pass anytime soon. I thought she would slowly get worse over the next few months and probably pass peacefully after her son. One Friday, I stopped in to check on Claude. He was okay. I made sure his pain was managed and that he was breathing comfortably. Joni was doing great with him, and I let her know I'd be heading to see Hilda and would check back with them next week. I drove over to the nursing home, talked to the staff, and they said Hilda was doing well, maybe even a little happier than usual. I was in a bit of a rush that day, running behind, and I knew I wouldn't have much time with Hilda. I walked into her room and she smiled and said, "Hi, I'm Hilda." I said, "Hi, Hilda. I'm your nurse. Just came by to see how you're doing." She replied, "I think I'm doing fine. Are you hungry? Did you eat?" I asked. "Oh, yes, dear. I think I had pancakes and sausage," she answered. "Very good. Any pain today?" "No, I never really have pain," she said. "Who are you?" she asked again. "I'm your nurse," I reminded her. "I'll just check your blood pressure and listen to your breathing, if that's okay." "Of course, honey. You do what you need to do. But I really don't think I need a doctor or nurse." I checked her vitals. Everything looked fine. No distress, no pain. She was doing great, all things considered. "All right, Hilda. Looks like you're doing well. I saw Claude and Joni this morning, and they're doing okay too. I'll see you again next week." Hilda smiled and said, "Well, honey, my son, the one on 145th Street, he said he was meeting me at the gate today at 2. He's taking me home. I won't be here." Knowing Claude's condition, I knew there was no way he was picking her up. Plus, she said 145th Street, but there are no numbered streets like that in Midland. And even in Odessa, the streets don't go that high. It was only noon, and there was no way Joni would be coming either. Sweet Hilda, still confused as usual, but it was nice she had something to look forward to. She looked good, and I was happy I'd get to keep visiting her for a while. "Okay, Hilda, I'll see you next week, all right?" She said, "Okay, but I won't be here." I packed up my bag, said goodbye to the nursing home staff, and drove back to Midland to visit my other patients. At 2:15, I got a text from Hilda's nursing home asking me to call them. I figured they needed a refill or something small. I called and spoke with Nurse Annie. "Hey, just checking on Hilda," I said. "She's gone," the nurse told me. "We saw her about 30 minutes ago and everything was fine. Then we came back in and she had passed." I was stunned. I'd gotten pretty good at knowing when my patients were close to dying. Yes, Hilda was sick, but I didn't think she would pass that day, or even that month. I thought about what she said earlier about her son meeting her at the gate. I called Joni and told her the news that Hilda had passed. Joni was sad, but not too shocked. After all, Hilda was 102. It wasn't a huge surprise at that age. I said I'd be going over to officially declare her death, and Joni said she would meet me there. I asked how Claude was doing, and she said he was fine, and they had just been talking. She wasn't sure yet if she'd tell him what had happened. I drove back to the nursing home and went to see Hilda. She had passed, just like the staff had said. A little later, Joni showed up. We hugged, and she told Hilda goodbye and said she and Claude loved her. We stepped out into the hallway, and I told Joni how surprised I was. It happened so fast, but it looked like she went peacefully. I told her about our final talk, how Hilda said her son was meeting her at the gate at 2, and how that was almost exactly the time she passed. I added that I first thought maybe Claude had died and came to meet her, but since he was still alive, I guessed it was just Hilda being confused again. After all, she mentioned her son was on 145th Street, and they didn't live on any 145th Street. Joni looked at me and said, "No, She meant her other son, Claude's brother. He lived on 145th Street in LC. He died about 5 years ago. I guess he was the one meeting her at the gate today at 2 to take her home. I was speechless, truly stunned. Claude passed away a few weeks later, and Joni a couple of years after that. Each time I thought about all of them meeting again at the gate to welcome each other. Story 13. I was at home, asleep on my mom's living room couch with the TV still on. I had put my phone under the pillow that was under my head. It felt like maybe an hour had gone by, and then I felt my phone start to vibrate, like someone was calling me. I looked at it and it said the call was from Peanut. I answered and said hello in a tired voice. My dad spoke from the other end. It sounded kind of fuzzy, but was definitely his voice, and he said, "Hey," just like he always used to, with a little surprise in his voice, like he couldn't believe it actually worked. I said, "Oh my God, hey." And then he told me his phone wasn't working, or he couldn't get it to work. It sounded like that's why he was using Peanut's phone to call me. He said he had been trying to reach everyone, and that he just wanted to tell me he loved me and that he was safe. Then he said, "I'm in room 4," and then he said a 3-digit number that started with a 4. I told him I loved him too, and that I was happy he was safe. I asked him to please say the room number again because I didn't catch it the first time. He repeated, "I love you and I'm safe," and then said the room number again. But once again, I couldn't make it out because the call got really fuzzy and the TV was too loud in the background. I told him, "I love you too, Dad." And after that, I don't remember how the call ended. But I do remember waking up in the exact same spot and position I had been in during the dream. And I just laid there thinking, what just happened? A few extra things I remember. He sounded kind of like he did when he was sick, but also a little bit better. When I had fallen asleep, I had been watching Family Feud, and I know that when it ends, infomercials come on that channel. One of those infomercials was playing in my dream and was way too loud, and the exact same one was playing when I woke up. None of my family knows anyone named Peanut either. Story 14. Hot Dogs Supreme. My mom and I were camping in the woods of northern Wisconsin. When we got to the campground, we were the only people there, which already felt kind of strange. Everything was okay for a while, but later our tent got completely filled with spiders, so we decided to sleep in the car instead. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was wide awake. I couldn't sleep because I felt nervous and kind of paranoid, like maybe someone was out there in the woods watching us. I looked out the left rear window of the car and saw something crazy, a big portal opening up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I pinched and slapped myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't. I could feel the pain, and I kept watching as the portal grew bigger and wider. It was about 7 to 8 feet tall and had a bluish-green glow, kind of like something you'd see in Rick and Morty, oddly enough. Right after that, I woke up my mom and asked her if she could see it too, and she did. She freaked out a little and whispered to me, "Don't move. Be quiet." I saw one human-shaped figure come out holding a lantern. He looked around for a bit and then signaled to the others. About 5 or 6 more people came out, all wearing clothes that looked kind of like old-fashioned Amish or Mennonite clothes. They each had lanterns, too. They stood in a group and seemed to be talking, then started walking off into the woods in a single-file line. The first person who came, he said he had been trying to reach everyone and that he just wanted to tell me he loved me and that he was safe. Then he said, "I'm in room 4." And then he said a 3-digit number that started with a 4. I told him I loved him too and that I was happy he was safe. I asked him to please say the room number again because I didn't catch it the first time. He repeated, "I love you and I'm safe," and then said the room number again, But once again, I couldn't make it out because the call got really fuzzy and the TV was too loud in the background. I told him, "I love you too, Dad." And after that, I don't remember how the call ended. But I do remember waking up in the exact same spot and position I had been in during the dream. And I just laid there thinking, what just happened? A few extra things I remember. He sounded kind of like he did when he was sick, but also a little bit better. When I had fallen asleep, I had been watching Family Feud, and I know that when it ends, infomercials come on that channel. One of those infomercials was playing in my dream and was way too loud, and the exact same one was playing when I woke up. None of my family knows anyone named Peanut either. Story 14. Hot Dogs Supreme. My mom and I were camping in the woods of northern Wisconsin. When we got to the campground, we were the only people there, which already felt kind of strange. Everything was okay for a while, but later our tent got completely filled with spiders, so we decided to sleep in the car instead. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was wide awake. I couldn't sleep because I felt nervous and kind of paranoid, like maybe someone was out there and UT of the portal was the one who went back in at the end. Once he stepped back through, the portal closed behind him. My mom and I watched the others walk into the woods, and we kept watching until we couldn't see their lights anymore. Right after that, my mom started the car, and we left without saying a word. We didn't talk at all during the car ride back to Illinois. Ever since then, both my mom and I have been strong believers in the paranormal and in aliens. I just want to know if anyone else has ever seen anything like this or gone through something similar, because I know how crazy this all sounds. But I swear this really happened.